The Nebraska Legislature is considering a constitutional amendment. It's called LR 305CA. It would allow recalls for the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, state auditor, and all members of the legislature. Senator Lauren Lippincott is one of 4 senators who introduced this amendment. He says citizens in 19 other states, including Kansas, Colorado, and Wisconsin, already have this power. The senator says this amendment is about holding state officials accountable the same way local officials are.
An elected official acting in bad faith can do significant harm in the years between elections. This is about providing voters with a constitutional tool of last resort when trust has been fundamentally broken.
The bill does not lay out the process for conducting recalls, instead leaving the specifics up to the legislature to hammer out in the future. If the Unicam passes the amendment this session, it would go before voters for final approval in November. One member of the public spoke in support of the bill. No opponents rose to speak.
We reached out to a few of the officials who'd be affected if the amendment passed. A few responded, including Attorney General Mike Hilger's office, who declined comment. State Auditor Mike Foley gave us a statement saying, "I was not aware of this proposed constitutional amendment and need to think more deeply about its implications. On the surface, I have no immediate concerns. We'll first alert you to any other reactions as they come in."